Ladies and gentlemen, life is a battleground of truth and deception. We live in a world where manipulation is a currency, and power games are played in relationships, careers, and even within our own minds. But I'll tell you something fundamental. If you master these 4 principles, you won't need to force confessions out of people. They will collapse under the weight of their own dishonesty. If you want to influence people, if you want them to see the truth, and if you want to command respect in any situation, you must first respect yourself. That is the foundation of everything. And I don't mean the superficial kind of self-respect that's plastered all over social media, empty affirmations, hollow confidence, and performative strength. No, I'm talking about real, deep, unshakable self-respect, the kind that radiates from you without needing validation, the kind that makes people sit up and listen when you walk into a room. Most people go through life desperately seeking external approval, bending over backward to be liked, tolerated, or included. But here's the truth. When you chase approval, you give away your power. You communicate to the world that your worth is negotiable. And if your worth is negotiable, then it's only a matter of time before someone takes advantage of that. Because people, whether consciously or unconsciously, test boundaries. They push, they prod, and they see how much they can get away with. If you don't have a firm grasp of your own value, they will decide it for you, and it will always be less than what you deserve. Think about it. If you don't set your own standards, someone else will set them for you. And do you really think they'll set them in your favor? No. The world rewards those who refuse to settle for less than what they are. The world bends to those who demand respect, not through aggression, not through manipulation, but through their mere presence. Now, you might say, well, how do I develop this kind of self-respect? It starts with one thing: knowing who you are and standing by it no matter the cost. That means defining your values and refusing to compromise them, even when it's inconvenient, even when it means losing people. Because if someone requires you to diminish yourself to stay in their life, they were never meant to be there in the first place. You have to be willing to walk away, and that's the hardest part, isn't it? The fear of loss, the fear of abandonment, the fear that if you demand respect, if you assert yourself, you'll be left alone. But let me tell you something. The moment you embrace that fear and push through it, something incredible happens. You stop needing external validation. You stop depending on people who do not serve your highest good. And when that happens, you become someone who cannot be manipulated, who cannot be guilt-tripped, and who cannot be controlled by fear. Look at history. Look at the figures who commanded true respect. They were not the ones who pleaded for attention or compromised their values for approval. They were the ones who stood firm, even when the whole world was against them. They were the ones who walked away from situations that did not align with their principles, even when it cost them everything. And in the end, the world had no choice but to respect them. People can sense when you truly respect yourself. It's in the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you react or don't react to situations meant to provoke you. When you have self-respect, you don't need to chase people down for explanations. You don't need to beg for honesty. You don't need to lower yourself to get what should already be given freely, because the moment you make it clear that you will not tolerate anything less than the truth, people will either step up or step out of your life, and both outcomes are a win for you. This applies to every area of life: relationships, friendships, the workplace, even the way you interact with strangers. If someone disrespects you and you let it slide, you teach them that disrespect is acceptable. If someone crosses a boundary and you excuse it, you teach them that your boundaries are flexible. If someone lies to you and you overlook it, you teach them that deceit has no consequences. But the moment you enforce your standards, the moment you refuse to accept anything less than what you deserve, the entire dynamic shifts. And this isn't about arrogance. This isn't about treating people poorly or thinking you're above everyone else. No, this is about understanding that respect is not freely given, it is earned. And it starts with how you treat yourself. Because if you don't take yourself seriously, why would anyone else? If you don't value your time, why would anyone else? If you don't demand honesty, why would anyone feel the need to be truthful with you? Now, let's take this a step further. Let's say someone has wronged you. They've lied, betrayed your trust, or taken advantage of your kindness. What do most people do? They beg for explanations. They demand apologies. They try to extract remorse from the other person as if that will somehow bring closure. But here's the thing. Closure is not something you get from others. It's something you give yourself. And nothing is more powerful than realizing you don't need an apology to move forward. You don't need a confession to confirm what you already know. The moment you stop chasing an admission of guilt, you take back control. And when you take back control, the other person feels it. If they have a conscience, they will feel the weight of their own actions. If they don't, then their opinion never mattered in the first place. Either way, you win, because true power is not in making someone confess. It's in making them realize they have lost access to the version of you that tolerated their nonsense. So here's the bottom line. Respect yourself so deeply that people have no choice but to respect you in return. Be willing to walk away from anything that does not align with your values. Speak with conviction. Enforce your boundaries. And above all, never lower your standards just to keep someone in your life. Because the moment you do, you tell the world that your worth is negotiable, and it isn't. Stand firm, demand respect, and watch as the world adjusts to your presence. People talk too much. They fill the air with words, desperate to explain themselves, to be understood, to justify, to defend. But the more you speak, the more you reveal, and often the more power you give away. The strongest people, the ones who command authority, the ones who are truly respected, are not the ones who shout the loudest. They are the ones who understand the weight of silence, the precision of speech, and the devastating effect of a well-placed pause. When someone is confronted with silence, they panic. They expect noise. They expect reaction. They expect engagement. But when none of that comes, they begin to unravel. They start filling the void with their own justifications, their own confessions, their own guilt spilling out in an attempt to make the discomfort go away. Silence forces people to face themselves. And for many, that is the most terrifying thing imaginable. Think about the last time you were in an argument. Maybe it was with a partner, a friend, a colleague. What was your instinct? Was it to explain yourself, to fire back with your own accusations, to match their words with even more words? That's what most people do. They escalate, they over-explain, they get emotional. But what happens when you don't engage in that game? What happens when you simply look at them calm, unmoving, unshaken? Most people cannot handle that kind of presence. They will scramble to fill the silence, and in doing so, they will expose themselves. They will admit to things they weren't planning to. They will reveal their insecurities, their guilt, their real motivations. Because silence, when wielded correctly, is not passive. It is the most active force in a confrontation. It shifts the burden of explanation onto the other person. It forces them to justify themselves while you remain an unmoving wall, unyielding, unaffected. There is a reason that great leaders, interrogators, and negotiators are masters of silence. They understand that words, once spoken, cannot be taken back, that every unnecessary word is a potential weakness, that the more you talk, the more opportunity you give others to find holes in your position. But when you speak with precision, when every word you choose carries weight, people listen. Most people speak because they are uncomfortable with silence. They talk to fill space, to ease tension, to gain approval. But the moment you become comfortable in silence, you become dangerous, because silence makes people think. It forces them to reflect. It makes them question what they just said, what they're about to say, whether they even believe their own words. Now, let's talk about precision. Words are tools, and like any tool, they can be used carelessly or with skill. A dull blade can hack away at something, making a mess, leaving jagged edges. But a sharp knife, it cuts clean. It takes only a single motion. That is how speech should be. Most people speak in a way that is vague, imprecise, and cluttered with filler. They say, I feel like maybe you didn't treat me very well. That's weak. What does that mean? It's uncertain, it's hesitant. Compare that to, you lied to me, and that is unacceptable. No room for doubt, no room for interpretation. Clear, direct, unshakable. The difference between the two is not just in wording, it's in impact. People respect precision because it shows confidence. When you say exactly what you mean without hesitation, people have no choice but to take you seriously. But the moment you introduce vagueness, you invite argument. You open the door for someone to twist your words, to deflect, to undermine you. This applies in every aspect of life, in relationships, in business, in conflict, in negotiation. If you want to be respected, if you want to be heard, you must train yourself to speak with precision. You must eliminate filler words. I think, I feel like, maybe, sort of. You must practice making your statements direct and clear, and above all, you must learn when to say nothing at all. Because sometimes silence is the loudest statement you can make. When someone expects a reaction and they get nothing, it throws them off balance. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to keep talking, to keep explaining, to keep revealing. And the more they reveal, the more power they lose. Now, you might be thinking, but what if I need to defend myself? What if I need to explain my side? And to that I say, choose your battles. Not every situation requires your defense. Not every accusation requires your response. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. Because the moment you engage, you validate the other person's position. You give them something to push against. But when you remain silent, when you let them exhaust themselves trying to get a reaction from you, they lose momentum. Look at how the most powerful people in the world operate. The best leaders, the best negotiators, the best minds. They are not the ones who talk endlessly. They are the ones who wait, who listen, who speak only when necessary. And when they do, their words hit like a hammer. If you want to be respected, if you want to be taken seriously, you must train yourself to do the same. Learn to sit in silence. Learn to hold eye contact without rushing to fill the space. Learn to let others reveal themselves. And when you do speak, make sure every word is intentional. Because when you master the art of silence and precision, you no longer have to fight for respect. You command it without saying a word. The most powerful thing you can do to another person is not to argue with them, not to attack them, not to force them into submission, but to make them see themselves clearly. Because when a person is confronted with the truth of who they are, when they are forced to face their own contradictions, their own failures, their own moral corruption, it is far more devastating than any punishment you could inflict. And yet, most people never experience this because they are never forced to look in the mirror. They avoid it, they justify, they blame, they twist reality to make themselves the victim or the hero of every situation. But the truth is much harder to escape when it is reflected directly back at them. People spend their lives crafting narratives about themselves, stories that excuse their mistakes, that make their betrayals seem reasonable, that justify their worst actions. They construct elaborate mental defenses, shifting blame onto circumstances, onto other people, onto anything but themselves. And as long as those defenses remain intact, they can continue living in that illusion. But when you disrupt that illusion, when you strip away the excuses and force someone to see what they have done, really see it, they are left with only two options: admit the truth or break under its weight. This is not about revenge. It's not about cruelty. It's about accountability. You do not make someone see themselves by screaming accusations, by attacking them with anger, by demanding that they confess. No, that only gives them something to push against. That only strengthens their defenses. If you want someone to confront the truth, you must lead them to it, not as an enemy, but as a mirror. The way to do this is through questions, not just any questions, but the right ones, the ones that cut through the noise, the ones that expose the contradictions in their thinking, the ones that force them to process the reality they have been avoiding. Why did you do that? What does that say about you? Would you accept that behavior from someone else? These are not accusations. They are reflections. They turn the person inward. making them evaluate their own justifications, making them wrestle with their own conscience. Most people have never been truly challenged in this way. They are used to escaping accountability through argument, through emotional manipulation, through denial. But when you do not argue, when you do not get emotional, when you simply hold up a mirror and let them sit with their own words, their own choices, they feel something far worse than your anger. They feel the weight of their own dishonesty, and that weight is crushing. The reason this is so powerful is because people lie to themselves far more than they lie to others. They tell themselves they are good, that they are justified, that they had no other choice. But deep down, on some level, they know. The human mind is remarkably good at suppressing guilt, at twisting reality, at maintaining self-deception. But it can only do that if it is allowed to. The moment you strip away the distractions, the rationalizations, and leave someone alone with the raw truth, they will feel it. And the thing about guilt, real guilt, is that it does not go away easily. It lingers, it festers, it demands resolution. That is why this method works, because you are not forcing a confession. You are making it impossible for them to avoid one. And when someone reaches that point, when they can no longer deny what they have done, when they feel the full weight of their choices, they will admit everything, not because you pressured them, but because they can no longer bear to live in the lie. But here is the crucial part. This only works if you remain completely composed. The moment you become emotional, the moment you turn it into an argument, you give them an escape. If they can shift the focus onto your reaction, if they can make you look unreasonable, aggressive, unstable, they will. And then they won't have to face themselves. But when you remain calm, when you ask your questions with quiet confidence, when you refuse to let them pull you into a fight, you leave them no way out. This is why silence is so effective in these moments. Ask a question and then wait. Let them fill the space. Let them try to explain themselves. And as they do, listen, not to argue, not to contradict, but to understand exactly where their defenses are weak. And when they finish, respond with another simple, undeniable question that makes them go deeper. This is how you break through, not with force, but with relentless clarity. And when it happens, when they finally see themselves for who they are, when the weight of their actions crashes down on them, that is when they will admit everything. Not because you made them, but because they can no longer hide from it. And in that moment, they will beg for your forgiveness. They will cry. They will try to undo what has been done, because now they are the ones who want resolution. But here is the final lesson. Their admission, their remorse, their tears, these are not your victory. Your victory was in maintaining your own integrity, in holding your ground, in refusing to let yourself be manipulated or deceived. Whether or not they confess is not what matters. What matters is that you remained unshaken, that you did not compromise your own truth, that you did not lower yourself to their level. That is what real strength is. And when you walk away, you will know you didn't win because you forced the truth out of them. You won because you never needed to. The truth was always there. You simply made it impossible for them to ignore. Control over your emotions is not weakness. It is not repression. It is not avoidance. It is power. Because the moment you allow someone to dictate how you feel, how you react, how you behave, you have already lost. You have handed over control. You have made yourself predictable, easy to manipulate, easy to provoke. And people, whether they realize it or not, test others constantly. They push buttons. They say things to get a reaction. They try to knock you off balance to see what they can get away with. But when you refuse to react in the way they expect, when you remain calm, composed, unreadable, you disrupt the entire dynamic. You take control. Most people live at the mercy of their emotions. They feel anger, so they lash out. They feel hurt, so they beg for reassurance. They feel slighted, so they demand validation. But do you see the pattern? In every case, their actions are dictated by what someone else has done to them. Their internal state is completely dependent on external factors. And that is a dangerous place to be because it means that anyone who knows how to push the right buttons can control them like a puppet. But imagine for a moment that you are unshakable. Imagine that no matter what is said to you, no matter how someone tries to provoke you, no matter what games they play, you remain calm. You do not react emotionally. You do not give them the satisfaction of seeing you flinch, of seeing you struggle, of seeing you lose control. What happens then? The power shifts because now instead of you being at their mercy, they are at yours. They are the ones scrambling, the ones trying to figure out what you're thinking, the ones feeling exposed and vulnerable. This is not about suppressing emotion. Suppression is unhealthy and it is not sustainable. No, this is about mastery. It is about feeling the emotions, but not letting them dictate your actions. It is about allowing yourself to acknowledge your anger, your pain, your frustration, but choosing how and when to express them rather than being a slave to them. It is about responding instead of reacting. And this is where discipline comes in, because in the heat of the moment, when someone is pushing you, testing you, trying to get a rise out of you, your instinct will be to fire back. Your instinct will be to defend yourself, to demand answers, to prove a point. But you must override that instinct. You must train yourself to pause, to breathe, to step back internally and assess the situation. Is this reaction necessary? Will it serve me, or am I just giving them what they want? The most powerful people in the world are not the loudest. They are not the ones who explode in anger, who demand respect, who wear their emotions on their sleeves. They are the ones who control themselves so completely that others have no choice but to respect them. They are the ones who walk into a room and command attention, not because they are shouting, but because their presence is unshakable. They are the ones who can handle any situation without losing their center, without being thrown off course, without allowing someone else to dictate their internal state. And here's the truth. When you master your emotions, when you train yourself to remain calm under pressure, to hold your ground without reacting, people will confess things they never intended to say. They will reveal their own insecurities, their own weaknesses, their own guilt. They will admit everything, not because you demanded it, not because you forced it out of them, but because they cannot handle the fact that you are not reacting the way they expected. The weight of their own actions will crash down on them because you are not there to carry it for them. This is the power of control. When you do not let people dictate your emotions, they are left alone with their own, and that is a far more powerful consequence than anything you could say or do. Because words can be argued with, reactions can be countered, but silence, composure, unwavering self-discipline, that is something they cannot fight. That is something they cannot escape. That is something they will feel in their very core. So train yourself. Learn to hold your emotions instead of letting them hold you. Learn to pause before you react. Learn to stay calm when every part of you wants to lash out. Because the moment you do, you take control, not just of the situation, but of yourself. And that is the greatest power you will ever possess. The fundamental truth about human nature is that people cannot bear the weight of their own contradictions forever. They may deceive, they may manipulate, they may pretend, but deep down they know. They know when they have betrayed, they know when they have lied, they know when they have acted in ways that contradict the values they claim to hold. And that knowledge, even if buried under layers of denial, is corrosive. It eats away at them. It creates an internal tension that must at some point be resolved. But here is the crucial thing. Most people will not face that truth unless they are forced to. They will not voluntarily dismantle the illusions they have built around themselves. They will not easily admit to their own wrongdoing because doing so requires a level of humility, of self-awareness, of courage that many people simply do not have. But there is one thing that makes it almost impossible to maintain that illusion. being confronted with someone who refuses to participate in the game, someone who does not argue, who does not plead, who does not fall into the emotional traps laid before them, someone who stands firm, unmoved, unshaken. Most people expect conflict. They expect to be challenged with words, with accusations, with demands. And as long as they get that, they can continue justifying themselves. They can keep fighting back, keep spinning narratives, keep holding on to the version of reality that serves them. But when none of that comes, when they are instead met with quiet, unwavering certainty, something shifts. Suddenly, the responsibility to justify, to explain, to make sense of their actions falls entirely on them. This is where guilt becomes unbearable, not when it is shouted at them, not when it is forced upon them, but when it is left with them, unchallenged, undeniable. Because now there is nothing to push against, no argument to distract them, no anger to justify their own defensiveness, just silence, just themselves, just the reality of what they have done, sitting there in the open with nowhere to hide. And in that moment, something happens. The pressure builds. The weight of their own actions becomes too much to bear. And the truth they have been avoiding, the truth they have twisted and suppressed, starts to rise to the surface. And once it does, they cannot stop it. It spills out, first in pieces, then in waves. The guilt, the shame, the regret, it all comes rushing out, not because they were forced, but because they could no longer hold it back. The most powerful confessions, the most genuine admissions of wrongdoing, do not come from people who are pressured into them. They come from people who have been left alone with their own conscience long enough that they could no longer escape it. And this is the key. The person who holds their ground, who does not react, who does not play the game, becomes the one who forces that confrontation, not by demanding it, not by arguing, but by being the living embodiment of the truth they are trying to avoid. This is why integrity, strength, and composure are so powerful, because when you refuse to bend, when you refuse to engage in deception, when you stand there as an immovable force of reality, you become a mirror that forces them to see themselves clearly, perhaps for the first time. And that is what breaks them. Not your words, not your anger, not your attempts to convince them, but the unbearable weight of their own reflection. This is why so many people avoid truly honest individuals. It is why they are uncomfortable around those who will not tolerate lies, who will not engage in manipulation, who will not get dragged into pointless emotional battles. Because those individuals, without even trying, force others to see themselves in ways they are not ready for. They strip away the justifications, the stories, the distractions, and leave only reality. And when reality is undeniable, the truth comes out, not just in words, but in the way a person breaks down, in the way their defenses collapse, in the way they finally surrender to what they have known all along. They will beg, they will cry, they will confess, not because you demanded it, but because the alternative, continuing to live in a self-created illusion, is no longer possible. But the true power in this does not come from what you do to them. It comes from what you refuse to allow them to do to you. It comes from the fact that you did not stoop to their level, that you did not get caught in their games, that you did not let them dictate your emotions or your actions. It comes from the fact that you remained completely and utterly in control, not just of the situation, but of yourself. And that is the final, most important lesson. The greatest power does not come from forcing someone to admit the truth. It comes from making it impossible for them to continue living in the lie. And when you can do that, when you can stand in the face of deception with absolute clarity and unshakable resolve, you will never need to demand the truth, because the truth will reveal itself, whether they want it to or not. The ultimate power does not come from force, from aggression, or from demanding submission. It comes from unwavering clarity, from absolute self-mastery, from an unshakable commitment to the truth. When you refuse to engage in manipulation, when you do not allow your emotions to be controlled, when you strip away illusion and leave only reality, you create an environment where deception cannot survive. People may try to lie, to twist the narrative, to justify their actions, but in the face of calm, relentless truth, those defenses will crumble. The person who masters themselves, who remains composed, who does not react emotionally, who does not allow themselves to be dragged into pointless battles, becomes the one who holds all the power. Because when you do not waver, when you do not engage in their games, when you simply stand firm as an undeniable mirror to their actions, they will have no choice but to see themselves for who they truly are. And that, more than any confrontation, more than any argument, is what will break them. In the end, the goal is not to make someone beg, cry, or admit everything for the sake of power or vengeance. The goal is to hold yourself to the highest standard, to remain unshaken in the face of deception, to force accountability not through force, but through the sheer weight of undeniable truth. Because when you do that, when you stand firm in absolute integrity, the truth will not need to be forced out. It will reveal itself. And in that moment, the person before you will no longer be able to escape it.